As the committee comes to order, today the committee is pleased to welcome the Honorable Donald H. Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, second time around. General Hugh Shelton, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Dr. Dov Zakheim, the Comptroller of the Defense Department. Our witnesses are here to testify on the President's amended defense budget request for fiscal year 2002. It's taken more than a usual amount of time, as I suggested, to put this package together, Mr. Secretary, but we can appreciate the challenges you've been facing. While the Department's budget request for fiscal year that's ahead of us is $328.9 billion, that is a reflection of $32.6 billion over last year's enacted level. This represents an increase of 7%, taking inflation into account, the largest proposed single-year increase for defense since the mid-1980s. Mr. Secretary, for a good many years now, members of this committee have been pointing out the need for significant funding increases in support of our national security effort. And there's no question that with this budget, you and the President have recognized this as well. And I would ask those who would question the size of this increase to carefully examine where these additional funds would go. Of the $33 billion increase, some three-quarters, or nearly $25 billion, is in direct support of our men and women in uniform, for increases in pay and medical care, for housing and installations, and for training and operational support. That is the vast majority of the additional funds you're requesting, and it's really by way of taking care of the basics. They put our people first, and for that, Mr. Secretary, I commend you. Another area of emphasis in this budget lies in the area of missile defense. I must say that General Kadich had to be doing a dance over the weekend as we began to face a series of tests, as he's described it, but a very, very successful development in terms of the prospect of asking for additional funding for missile defense. In this area, the administration is bringing forward a series of proposals which, in terms of policy, priority, and process, have already generated debate and no small degree of controversy. This involves not just questions about the ABM treaty, but also over funding priorities within our defense program and whether and how we can redesign the process for developing and fielding new technologies to meet new threats. I hope we are able to engage with you today on these issues involving missile defense, Mr. Secretary, for they are not only important and in and of themselves, but they speak to a larger challenge we all must confront. That is, what are the real threats of the future? Where should we be putting our priorities? And how best can we move forward once we decide to meet those priorities? For as we all know, the threat of ballistic missiles is just one of many challenges that confront our nation and its allies as we move into the years ahead.
This committee knows well the numbers and the situation of the armed forces today, probably better than almost anyone in Washington. So you understand the shortfalls that the men and women in uniform have been facing in terms of readiness operation, procurement, health care, maintenance, infrastructure, modernization, housing, intelligence. We do have the best trained, best equipped military force on earth, as the chairman indicated, and peace and prosperity and freedom across the world are underpinned by the stability and the security that these men and women provide. But there is no question but that years of underfunding and overuse have taken a toll. With the end of the Cold War, there was a drawdown, an appropriate peace dividend, but it overshot the mark by a good deal. And as the size of the force was reduced, the men and women in uniform were asked to take on more and more missions. They saluted, they did their best, but at the cost of putting off maintenance, training, procurement, and other necessities, and now that bill is staring us in the face. The cumulative effect of year after year of neglect is catching up. The budget numbers the chairman mentioned, it's a sizable increase, some $22.8 billion. That's a significant commitment of the taxpayers' dollars. but we need every cent of it. Let there be no doubt. We need the funds for pay and housing and health care and quality of life. We need it for the backlog in maintenance, modernization, and transformation and research and development. And this budget certainly helps, but let's be clear, it does not get us well. I know that, and you know that. The underinvestment and overuse of the force went on far too long. The gap is too great. The hole we're in is too deep. There's no way to spend our way out of it in 1 year. Again, you know that, and I know that. We're proposing this budget in full recognition that just to keep the department going next year on a straight line basis with no improvements, just covering cost of inflation and honest budget numbers, we'd need a budget of $347 billion, another $18 billion increase. To get well by 2007, that is to meet current requirements in areas like readiness, proper flying time, training, maintenance, and so forth, would cost the American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars more, and that's before calculating the additional investment that will be needed for transformation.
Mr. Dix?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary and General Shelton. I want to go back to this question about the money. Jerry Maguire said, "Show me the money." You know, we've had some studies that were done by very prominent people. I think Jack Murtha was on one group, but that said we needed $60 billion a year more. And the Harold Brown and Schlesinger called for an increase of $50 billion annually. Now, Mr. Secretary, the other day you had us over when we appreciated that very much, and you went through and kind of added up what was necessary to really do this budget correctly. And it was significantly more than the $18 billion that we're talking about in the increase in the '02 budget. I mean, I think it's important for you to tell the American people, in your own personal and professional opinion, you and General Shelton, what you think we need to have in order to deal with not only the very important quality of life issues, but transformation and modernization. I mean, what do you think the number is that would help us deal with the problems that really face the country in terms of transformation and modernization?
Well, Congressman Dix, in my prepared statement, I discussed some of that, and in my statement before the Armed Services Committee, I have laid out a whole series of areas that have been underfunded year after year after year by the United States government.
Right.
There is no way on the face of the earth we're going to dig out of the hole we're in 1 year. It will take a series of years. And it is unambiguous that they overshot the peace dividend by a significant margin. We are currently recapitalizing infrastructure in the Pentagon at 192 years. The private sector appropriate rate is something like 57 to 67 years recapitalization. Now, you don't get that right fast. It takes some time. Our shipbuilding budget is headed down to 230 ships. It's currently at 310 or so. But year after year of not building sufficient ships has put us on a trajectory that is clearly unacceptable for this country.
But you know, here's a great article in the Weekly Standard. No defense. Here's some unsolicited advice for two old friends, Donald Rumsfeld and Paul Wolfowitz. Resign. I mean, in other words, I think you've tried to do your best to go down to the White House and ask for the money that's necessary to get this job done, but you've been turned down. And they have said they will not give you the money. As we're told, you asked for like $38 billion. And OMB said you'll only get 15 and you wound up with 18. And we appreciate the fact that you got the 18. But what I worry about is if you, as Secretary of Defense and General Shelton, know that the country is underfunding the defense budget, then why can't we convince the President and OMB, who seems to be running this government, that we've got to have a significant increase or we're going to let America's military capability deteriorate? That is unacceptable.
Mr. Congressman, the country has known we've been underfunding the defense budget year after year after year. This is nothing new. I just arrived. I walk in the front door, turn around, look under every rock, and every one of them says we need $3 billion more. We need $6 billion more here. We need $5 billion more there. You can't do it all in 1 year.
I understand
it is not possible.
okay, I understand that. But would $38 billion have been a more realistic number for '02 than 18 in terms of the problems that we're facing? I'm with you. I agree with what you're trying to tell the country, that we're significantly underfunding defense. Now, I've been here for 21 years on this committee. Maybe it's even longer than that. And I'll tell you, I've heard everybody say we're going to do it by improving procurement and doing all that, and I'm with you on that. I agree with you. But I don't think we're going to solve this problem without a significant increase in funding. I think you said that. I think your statement says that. I mean, you just didn't add it up.
Mr. Congressman, this is a significant increase. It's the biggest increase since the mid-1980s.
But if it isn't enough to get the job done, Mr. Secretary, we're not fooling each other.
You can't do it all in 1 year. It is not physically possible.
But you've got to start with a single step that's significant. And the thing that frustrates us here, and I'm a good Democrat, but when I heard Mr. Cheney say properly during the campaign that we needed to do more on defense, that help was on the way, I thought we were going to see something significant. Like when Ronald Reagan was elected president, Ronald Reagan increased the defense budget. And we did it significantly, and it addressed the problems. And in 1991, when Cheney and Powell had to go to the war, we had a military capability that was sufficient to get the job done. Now, what we're seeing here today is we're allowing the deterioration of America's military capability because we're not doing transformation right, we're not doing modernization right. And I say this with all due respect. I hope that you would be successful in your dealings with the administration, but apparently that isn't happening. And I think we have to be honest. General Shelton, what do you think? I mean,
wait a second. You're not going to lay that on me and not let me answer, are you? Look, this budget does not continue the deterioration. This budget reverses the deterioration that's been going on for year after year after year. It is a significant step forward.
But not in transformation and not in modernization, Mr. Secretary. You say it in your bit. You go through every category and say what we're short of. We didn't get it. We didn't get the help we needed in transformation. We didn't get the help we needed in modernization.
When you say, let's be honest, that testimony you received from me is as honest as anyone can be. I have laid it right out there.
Exactly. And that's why I'm saying, if you've laid it out, why doesn't the White House get it?
Well, they do, and they gave us the biggest increase in 16 years and a 7% increase, and walking away the largest increase of any department or agency. And we are completing our quadrennial, congressionally mandated quadrennial defense review. The conclusions out of that will have additional recommendations for transformation. There are transformation aspects in this budget, and when we come out with that, as the chairman indicated, it will be arriving at a time when we're developing that 03 budget.